Hey, Matty boy. It's Wednesday. This is Business Pants. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, but I'm still ready to go. Got a big ESG day, Matt. It's Wednesday, January 29th, 2020. Matt Moscardi. Matt, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the decades of combined experience the two of us
I
have?
thought you were going to say tell them a little bit about ourselves.
Well, we
I
can do
have
that one day.
two cats.
We can do that.
We have a multiple decades of combined experience in ES
Take
and
that.
G, which makes us homers in absolutely no way. In fact, it makes us totally jaded. If you are looking for the jaded ESG experience, please
Uh,
listen to Business Pants and subscribe. Give us the 5 stars.
I want to say right at the top, just because you have opinions that run counter to the majority does not mean you're jaded. It just means that your brain is a little bit more active
We're we're Gen Xers. Are you kidding me?
than your fellow. All right,
We're
fine,
like
whatever.
the reality bites of ESG.
Some of us don't like going to meetings where it's silent. Okay,
I'm just
I
kidding.
I, I,
We
I
love
learned to
ESG.
loathe that, and so I left the company. No,
what
I'm serious.
do,
Sorry, I'm saying it. I'm sorry.
what do we got on tap today?
Uh, Just some generic headlines, some business news, some business pants headlines, some headline catch up as you would, as you will, as you were.
I like to spill
Uh,
ketchup.
yeah, some earnings, some viruses, some spying, and then we're going deep inside the pants. So it's Wednesday, we talk about all things ESG. We got some ESG headlines, and two experts in the field, Matt Moscardi and Damian Rallis, will talk about some ESG crap. There you go.
So I have a surprise for you, Damian Rallis.
Oh God.
You're gonna like this surprise. You have been asking for different transition music from the harp.
Okay, I'm
So if
ready.
you are a regular listener to this show, you know that between segments we usually play a harp sound. And
Yeah.
now the music team has come up with this one. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. I am going to play it, and you are going to give me immediate feedback
Gonna like it.
in
Yeah.
your feeling. Okay, here we go.
It's not the harp. I'm already a fan. Yeah. It's already good. I love it.
I thought it was very newsy.
I gotta say, even for 2019, the harp was very 1819. That's how I felt about the harp. But this is 2020. It's not even 2020. It's 2020. This is a big deal.
So what's happening in 2020?
The Jetsons are fully formed, fully realized. Okay, let's see. You want to go right to headlines?
Yeah,
Headline.
what's in the headlines?
All right.
We got some catch up to do.
Coronavirus unfortunately dominating the headlines, so we might as well just cover it. Death toll climbs to 132 now. Cases exceed SARS, blah, blah, blah. Novartis believes it will take at least 12 months to find a new vaccine. Starbucks is temporarily closing about 2,000 stores in China. Here's the fun one. Apple supplier Foxconn, amid this incredible coronavirus panic, where basically China is telling the world, like, we need to take a break from everything. We got to deal with this. Countries are getting their people out. Airlines they're not going there. Everything's coming to a bit of a halt. But Apple supplier Foxconn said it could continue to meet all manufacturing obligations in the wake of a coronavirus outbreak, even as the iPhone maker flagged uncertainty created by the disease. And this is their creepy quote that sounds like the ghost of Steve Jobs has a iPhone-shaped gun to their head. Here's the quote. We do not comment on our specific production practices, but we can confirm that we have measures in place to ensure that we can continue to meet all global manufacturing obligations. I mean, isn't that weird? It strikes me as so entirely just so bizarre. All
Um,
this is going on, and we have to keep up with iPhone production.
I have two questions for you. Number one, does this partially explain why Foxconn had a rash of suicides in 2013 and 14?
They're
Um,
they're diligent.
and
They're
I,
scared.
I mean, they don't even shut down when their people are dying of a virus. And number two, and more selfishly, does this mean if I buy a new iPhone, it might have coronavirus on it?
This is like a creepy version of Joe Rogan's Fear Factor. That's all I can say. For a 90s reference there.
just, I will not lick any iPhones that I purchase in the next 6 months.
And I will come out and say that I don't really understand why the number one podcast in the world is Joe Rogan, but whatever. All right.
It's business pants.
Business pants. Yeah. We're at like number 1,443,000.
I think
But
we
okay,
need to
we're growing.
plead with our Filipino and Finnish brethren to. We've fallen off the charts of the Philippines, so no one's listening again.
All right. So earnings. It's a big earnings week. I don't really know what that means, but the few highlights are, of course, strong iPhone sales at Apple.
Yeah,
How about that?
it's funny that we're talking about Apple.
Oh, Apple iPhone. Yeah.
Because there were reports of Apple sitting on over $200 billion of cash. If any company can afford to say, Foxconn workers, really honestly, go
Yeah, take a
home, wash your hands, wear a mask, avoid a deadly disease that's a deadly pandemic. It seems like it would be Apple, and yet we're talking about Apple's earnings and how there's demand for it to go up and they need to spend that cash.
Speaking of cash in the other direction, Boeing. Right? We talked about Boeing here, right?
Do we
Boeing.
really? When?
Boeing posted its first annual loss since 1997 due to the 737 MAX crisis. No surprise, obviously. Boeing's bill from the crashes has roughly doubled to nearly $19 billion. But here's the catch, or should I say, here's the kicker. New CEO David Calhoun said, who, as we've established many times here, is actually just another insider. So it's just like sort of the next domino up, next white man up from the tissue box, said he's confident that regulators will permit the 737 MAX to return to service by the middle of 2020. There's no reason, he has no proof for the confidence, just saying it. Last week, Boeing gave airlines and suppliers that same timetable, which was months later than the company previously expected. So there you go. New CEO David Calhoun, in establishing a whole new culture, is basically making shit up.
Can we stop referring to him as the new CEO? We just need to.
What should we call him? Like dusted off board member who's now in control?
We should just. I mean, we should. Yeah. I mean, it should be
Caterpillar 3, David Calhoun.
Long-standing insider Dave Calhoun.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, yeah, I mean, everything about it is just. It's exactly. There's no evidence that there has been culture change at all within Boeing.
How could there be?
I mean, they still have almost the exact same board. And we talked about how, 10 of the 11 board members who voted for the 737 MAX also voted for the 777X, which just to great fanfare had its maiden voyage.
Yeah.
I don't. I even looked up what Kobe Bryant's helicopter manufacturer was. Turns out,
it
turns out it's Lockheed Martin. Marilyn Houston, who's the CEO of Lockheed Martin, sits on the business roundtable with the Ken Duberstein client, along with Boeing ex-CEO Dennis Muhlenberg, who I guess now he's going to be replaced on the business roundtable board with somebody more insidery.
Next,
it's nuts.
Yeah. Britain, defying calls from the White House to block Huawei products, said it would not ban the Chinese company from being used in its new high-speed 5G wireless network. The EU followed Britain's example, allowing members to decide what part Huawei can play in its 5G networks. A Trump administration official said, "Our special relationship is less special." I mean, if you take a little special out of special, it's not really special anymore, right? It's just a relationship.
I listen to Jim Cramer at all and Squawk on the Street.
I don't. I see some of his ludicrous headlines, but I don't know. I don't listen to him.
So they were talking about this yesterday, on Squawk on the Street, and Cramer basically like analogized this to treason. Like he even said like the redcoats at one point during like a semi angry tinged I won't say rant because it wasn't quite a rant. It was definitely a displeasure.
Treason, like treason from and what?
I
By
treason
who?
from the treaty that we have with the UK to stick
Oh,
together on anti-China rhetoric. I don't know what the treason was. But one of the other hosts actually said, because Kramer says, would you rather? Do you just want the communists to listen to you? He said the communists, like it's 1947. Do you want the
right.
communists to listen to you? And the other host was like, do I want Facebook to listen to me? And then, but they just let that kind of pass.
Oh,
And I was kind of like, yeah, but that's the whole point. He's right.
yeah.
Do you pick your poison?
Here, to be fair to England, to Britain, they're kind of in a bad position, right? If they do work with Huawei, Washington, the U.S. has threatened to withhold intelligence, and if they don't work with Huawei, China has threatened economic retaliation. And let's not forget that because of their stupid populist right movement, they're severing their ties with the EU essentially. So they can't really afford to screw up with China right now. I don't know. It's I don't know what's going on.
I'm gonna
That's
call.
all.
I'm gonna make a call to Theresa May, find out what's happening.
Well, May is
Oh, she's still.
gone.
I know she's out, but
Yeah.
she's. You're always in. Boris
Oh,
doesn't take my calls anymore.
That's true. Okay. Let's get out of it. Let's get out of it.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's get inside the pants. Let's
Transition me in a 2020 kind of way.
let's do this. I do feel like I'm in a newsroom when that
Like
goes
it.
on.
Like it. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's like I don't know. I feel like we're in the 1990s now.
We're at least it's a step up from the 1890s.
Yeah, it's true. All right, so let's go inside the pants, man.
A lot of stories. I feel like.
Yeah, I do have a lot to cover. I'll try to get it through quickly, and then we can have a chat. Feel free to interrupt as usual, but this is a week load of some nice ESG stories. ESG. Why don't you quickly define ESG? Because we have to, because we still have that stupid acronym. So go ahead, define.
Environmental social governance. It's a style of investing that ranges from if you're worried about climate change, you proof your portfolio against it, to I don't like smoking, so I exclude it from my portfolio. It all gets lumped into ESG, rightly or wrongly.
So it's kind of like a socially responsible investing. That's kind of like maybe a better way of describing it.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. I think some of it has
part of
nothing to do with social responsibility.
That's true.
Actually, the vast majority of it now, for institutional investors, it's not socially responsible at all. It's still a money-making machine.
The New York State Pension Fund said it was reviewing whether to divest from 27 coal companies. BlackRock's Larry Fink says he feared a severe backlash for his climate crisis letter to CEOs. I tend to doubt that one.
No, that's amazing narrative spin. That's what that is.
It's a Larry Fink as hero.
Yes, exactly. It's very Christy-ish.
Yeah. State Street, which is a big BlackRock rival with over $3 trillion in assets under management, plans to vote against directors of companies in major stock indexes that fall behind targets for ESG changes. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to derail us too much, but these are all kind of like, so BlackRock and State Street are majority passive, basically. They own passive index. They manage passive indexes, and they're going to vote. They're saying they're going to vote differently on like environmental or corporate governance things. But what if the company says no? Like, we don't care. We're on the passive list. We're on the index.
What do you mean no? No to what?
So BlackRock goes out, State Street go out, and they say, this diversity is a big problem. We're going to vote out board members who are no longer diverse. In the U.S., the vote is advisory, right? The board members can still sit.
It's true, but a lot of companies do listen to these votes. Not all of them, but they do.
But what's the leverage beyond that, if you vote out the director, right? They BlackRock and State Street can't divest because it's passive. They
They can't
can't.
divest. I think we've seen over the last 10 years or so that, if you just isolate even on the Women on Boards movement, which I think it is, it's a movement. There have been significant increases over that time. I mean, it has made a difference, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm
That's
just so
all. I mean, that's
dubious
all I can
about
say.
like
Like,
at what point does that lever stop, right? Like
I don't know, but this is the way like progress sort of happens, at least in the Western world. It's sort of that slow. It's like it's partly like an educational movement and partly like a slow, shameful grind to what you want, right? A little bit of both.
cuz then on the other hand you have New York State basically saying we will pull the big lever, which is we no longer want to own this business model of coal.
Right.
It is not future proofed for a portfolio that we need to hold in perpetuity. And BlackRock and State Street can't do that. I mean, they can hypothetically if they change their index that they're pegged to for in their passive, they can do it in their active portfolios, but they're
Right.
majority passive. They're kind of like if I was a company, I'd kind of feel like, look, I'm on your lists, like I'm on the index lists. You have to own me. So why or like what are you
I
gonna
mean,
do?
you could pull a Norway or a Italy or a France, and you just mandate this crap, and then everyone can save a bunch of money, right? They don't have to be lists and like uh, campaigns
I
and
don't
all
think
this crap.
that's ever going to happen in the U.S.
No,
The
of course
SEC
not.
is
I'm saying,
actively going the
although I don't know,
opposite direction.
but this is why we keep wondering about, if the right populist movement here swings to the left. Something could change. I don't know. I don't think we'll go that far, but who knows? Um,
Hmm.
According to staying on ESG investing, according to a Bloomberg report, 9 of the biggest ESG mutual funds in the U.S. outperformed the S&P 500 last year, and 7 of them beat their market benchmarks over the past 5 years. So, I think more and more of these stories are starting to put to rest this idea that hey, you can invest in ESG, but you're not going to make any money,
I hate
right?
those stories though.
And that's kind of the big feature of what we're going to be talking about later. So I'm going to keep moving.
Okay.
Swedish company Lundin Petroleum, probably Lundin Petroleum, pledges to become carbon neutral by 2030. Sainsbury's, grocery market chain in England, committed itself to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, a decade ahead of the British government's own target. Xerox is planning to nominate 11 board members to HP's board. So they're trying to take over HP by taking over the board because HP rejected the buyout offer. So that's a kind of a clever way of coming in. 357 Amazon employees posted public comments on Medium about the company's climate practices, urging the company to target more ambitious clean energy goals. The public outburst comes just weeks after Amazon threatened workers with disciplinary action or termination if they continue to speak publicly about the company without authorization. And finally, and a topic that we had a lot of fun with here in the past, Facebook's rules for its new oversight board basically leave the company firmly in control of uh,
What?
this this independent and name only oversight board. A couple of the highlights in a 46-page document. Facebook outlined the powers and limitations of the board, of course, stating that the company is committing to fund the trust that will support the board for 6 years. So they're only committing to 6 years, so they could just jump ship after that. The board will have the ability to review content moderation cases so long as they do not involve content posted on Facebook's marketplace, fundraisers, Facebook dating features, or the Facebook owned WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram Direct, or Oculus. So basically, they're already limiting the power of this great board that Zuck sort of trotted around for a couple of weeks.
How did do we know how the board's going to get picked? Do you know that? Did they
No,
talk?
so they haven't released the names yet. Those details are coming, and there's a lot more here we could go through. So maybe we could do an actual feature on this. Maybe next week. Actually, it's I think it's worth diving into. Be-
I just need to register my shock and surprise that this board will not be an independently functioning board.
yeah, and a lot of the decisions end up back at the Facebook board level, where, as we know, Zuck has complete control. And a lot of these decisions too, they explicitly say that these are one-off decisions and they won't actually affect the overall policies of Facebook. So let's get into it more next time, because I think that Facebook, as always here at Business Pants, is the perfect case study to describe, all the crap associated with these dictator-led companies, right? And why that question asked on that Kramer show is a good question.
Yeah, fake public and China. It's the same thing. Um,
I like it.
I,
Fake public in China. So you call China fake public? Yeah, China might be fake public. I like it.
but I do want to go back to the net zero, the carbon thing. There's like a
Yeah.
carbon announcement, especially 2020 is a nice round year. It's the beginning of the year. Every company's making announcements about how
Kicking the can down the road.
yeah, well, how incredible they're going to be. Just give us 15 years.
Yeah.
But I also want to tie it to earnings. So I was reading the earnings stuff, and I actually went and pulled like the Business Roundtable cash on hand, because it strikes me that Apple has 200 billion in cash on hand. That sounds like that's an extraordinary sum of money. The entire Business Roundtable board has about 115 billion in cash on hand. So Apple almost has twice the entire Business Roundtable's cash.
Okay.
Which just feels like a lot to me. But I was also thinking about it in conjunction with, we talked here about Microsoft's basically their net negative carbon pledge, where they want to remove all carbon that they've actually put into the atmosphere over the next 20 years or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super ambitious, very interesting. But we did some like really stupid basic math about how many trees they could buy to just remove their carbon. And we found a plot of land in Texas. But there was a story last July, 2019 July, about how many trees it would take to effectively undo or make humanity net zero.
Okay.
And scientists basically came up with a number of $300 billion it would cost.
$300 billion.
They identified the land that would be required, and the time. They made all these kind of scientific estimates. But in thinking about all these things kind of together in this big, ugly, ridiculous pot, earnings where these companies are sitting on a ton of cash that they're using on buybacks, carbon pledges about being carbon negative or neutral by 2300, the year 2790, and
we're all dead. Sure.
And the scientific sort of estimates of, if you plant trees, like a whole lot of trees, it was like 1.7 trillion trees, you can actually have humanity be zero. It struck me that if you were an investor, rather than divesting from a company, what would happen if you engaged them and made them use their cash, a percentage of their cash, instead of for buybacks, because that only helps an investor right now, today, right? Like you get the buyback, you get a stock bump, you feel happy, you get it. It's effectively like a special dividend for you. Mm-hmm. What happens if you took that money and instead of buying back, you did like a greenback or a tree back, and you used all buyback money to buy trees? Would you net negative humanity for carbon?
And there'd be like a long-standing ovation. Let me just tell you that. Wait, so didn't you tell me that, what were the buybacks at last year? Like, it was an astronomical figure. What was it?
Something like $940 billion of buybacks last year.
And what was the cost of that plan that scientists?
$300 billion.
Oh my God. I mean, that is depressing, Matt. I'm sorry.
That's what's crazy about it. That's totally insane to me.
I feel so demoralized right this second.
So like if you took, I mean, and that's a scientific estimate. Say you doubled it. That means if you spent 1/3 as much as you spent on buybacks in 2019, and you took the rest of the money you were going to spend on buybacks literally buying trees and land to plant the trees on, or paying someone to protect their land and not deforest, you could solve a huge portion of the climate crisis
That's nuts.
like instantaneously. And I know I'm oversimplifying this, but
No, but
in light of all these
not-
carbon pledges and all of these, like the Business Roundtable stakeholder this whole we care about humans and not shareholders. Stop fucking buying back your stock and spend that money on the things that you espouse now. You're the Business Roundtable. You've got $115 billion in cash. If you took 10% of that, by my estimate, just like your average tree's carbon absorption, you could reduce global emissions by almost 1% by yourself. That's just the Business Roundtable's board. If every company did the same thing, and every investor basically, instead of saying we're going to divest or let's engage with you, what are you doing about carbon? How are you reducing your carbon emissions? If every investor went to them and said, you know what I want to talk to you about is your buyback program, because you're spending a tremendous amount of money on buybacks, which really only help me today. I am a long-term investor. The bigger investment that matters is that you exist in perpetuity and there isn't a policy change around carbon. Buy some fucking trees with that buyback money.
Yeah, stop kicking the can down the road.
I mean, is that crazy? I feel like it's moderately crazy.
It seems nice. I like it. And I think you're onto something. I think that you're apologizing for oversimplification, but I think we need that. I think that the other side of that coin is overcomplication, and I think that's why Greta made such an impact, because she just kind of says it really kind of plainly, like buy some fucking trees, dorks, right? But I think we need to. I think this is where the conversation needs to turn toward, because all of this net zero 2050 divestment, it's always just kicking the can down the road. No one's being held accountable. So yeah, I'm with you, Matt.
I mean, if Apple came out and said we are going to do no buybacks in the next 2 years, who does that hurt?
It hurts Buffett.
Like, doesn't it only hurt?
He loves those buybacks.
And it doesn't even hurt BlackRock or Fidelity or State Street, because they're basically the middle agents of these things.
Yeah.
It really just hurts. So NYSERS, like the New York State, is saying we're going to divest from coal. And if Apple said, well, rather than divesting from coal, where there actually is some net benefit to coal, maybe not net benefit, but there's some benefit because they employ people. They pay salaries, they pay taxes, and I know they spew carbon and that's going to destroy the world, but there actually is some benefit. Rather than doing that, why don't we, one company, stop our buyback program, which helps you, New York State? Why don't we stop that and just plant trees to offset all coal companies that you would divest from? What would happen if they said that instead? Remember, Apple's sitting on $200 billion in cash, and the scientific estimate from last year was $300 billion, and they were looking for it from billionaire philanthropists. And this is where OK Billionaire becomes a big, serious problem, because OK Billionaire is we selectively choose that we want to help horses in Saudi Arabia that are being abused, rather than saying we could take our money and actually implement it in a very simple way to change the face of global climate. And again, I am oversimplifying on purpose. But does that conversation ever happen? Where does that happen?
Can we develop an S&P 500 company that just works on these problems and then have them have a seat on the Business Roundtable?
I doubt it. But
serious.
But it is looking through the Business Roundtable board members,
Young
right?
people,
if you were going to go out, and I looked at BlackRock's cash too, right? BlackRock's sitting on $5 or $6 billion in cash. If you look at these companies that are actively espousing these things, what they are doing at the same time is saying, oh, P.S., you know what? You know how environmentally friendly we are? We want to be carbon negative or carbon neutral by 29 billion years from now. We're 20 years from now, we promise that we won't do as much carbon. You know what doing it 20 years from now means? No one remembers it 20 minutes from now. Because it's so esoteric and difficult to comprehend. That's why people don't care about climate change, and you
Well,
got Steve Mnuchin saying learn something about economics. Well, Steve, here's a lesson. When there are no trees, the planet lights on fire and there is no economy. Plant some fucking trees, do something about that, and you have an economy 20 years from now when you still want one. Now,
let's
I
not
don't
pretend.
understand. I don't know how that conversation can happen, but I do feel
Yeah.
like if we've got so much cash and companies are just sitting on it, Apple, Tim Cook, Mr. Cook, I don't know you, I'm going to call you Mr. Cook. Instead of going and standing next to Donald Trump at a plant you opened in 2013 and pretending that douchebag is saying something, meaningful about how you brought jobs to America by opening a plant during his tenure, instead of doing that, go get your $200 billion of cash, take 50% of it, and buy some trees. Between you and Microsoft, you could probably solve half the carbon problem of the world just buying some trees. Don't buy back another share. Nobody needs another buyback from Apple, except for the New York State or CalPERS or CalSTRS or massive asset owners who are all trying to solve the carbon problem, because guess what? They own the future. They have future beta in their portfolio right now. They can't get away from it. They own everything. Solve their problem for them. And then you go on a massive press tour with all of them saying what we did solved a fiduciary problem for the 23rd century. We
Yeah.
paid it down now. We are a company thinking about 100 years from now. And the cash we spend now is an investment in not our future or our kids' future, but 3 generations from now and their portfolios and their products and their world. That's an amazing talking point.
And all those Silicon Valley lunkheads are desperate to get into heaven anyway. So it's the perfect path for them.
So I feel like this morning I was like, I think we can solve OK Billionaire, earnings, carbon, and the business roundtable stakeholder capitalism with like tree purchases.
The only problem is that they love those buybacks and they love their cash. They love their cash piles.
I don't sleep in enough of a cash pile to know what that's like,
Yeah.
but someday.
All right. Well, clearly an issue that we're not going to let go of, because I think it's just simple enough to work here. And as Greta said, because now I'm thinking that you are Greta's uncle, is that her biggest fear out of all this nonsense at Davos is empty rhetoric, right?
I'm not even an activist. This just seems logical to me. It seems
Well, I don't
like
even think, and
solving
again,
a problem.
I don't think she positions herself as an activist either, right? So I think that again, you guys are the same person.
Yeah, I can only wish.
All right,
I run a business snark fact based podcast for aspiring investors and ESG professionals that 4 people listen to.
oh,
Greta organizes marches around the world and gets invited to Davos. So we're almost the same person. It's like,
yeah, I think you are. All right, so do we even have time for our big story?
let's do it. No, let's do it. Yeah. I love
Okay.
this headline, by the way, for this story.
So I stumbled upon this on CNBC. This is by Kelly Evans, who works for CNBC. She is a journalist and co-anchor of Power Lunch on CNBC. She has a bachelor's degree in business journalism. And I don't say that, there's no judgment there. I'm just saying, like, this is who she is, and maybe this is, I don't, when you hear her thoughts and opinions, you can reflect on who she is. I don't know. I don't even know why I said that, but I did. So here's the story. Here's the headline: Are climate investors suckers? It's a good start, right?
I like that.
Are
Nothing clickbaity about that.
Are climate investors suckers? And first of all, the first thing I think of here is why is this field of environmental, social, and governance, research, why is it just like climate? Why is it just about the environment? Why does it always become just that?
No, it's not though.
But I'm saying, like, but I'm saying people like her who she has a pretty damn important job in the business world. This is how she sees the movement. It's a climate investor.
But she
anyway,
confuses it like halfway through, because the
Right,
headline is "Are climate investors suckers?" and then she's like cause-based investors, and it's like, Well, climate
All right.
investors aren't necessarily cause-based investors. They're worried they're going to be underwater in 10 years, right? Like,
So I pull out 5 points that we can
why
talk
don't you
about.
go
The
through
first
each
one
of them?
is,
Let's go through all of them
yeah,
and then come back at them.
here we go. This is all from her article. And again, this is not I'm not making fun of Kelly Evans. It's just interesting to talk about. Here's the first one. What worries me about the trend towards sustainable investing? How do you hold your money manager accountable? There are plenty of other ways to pressure corporate America to get more green than by trying to discern case by case who makes the ESG cut or not.
Okay.
All right, anything to say there?
It's like the underlying premise of what she's saying is there's an ESG cut.
Right.
So if you take that concept,
Uh-huh.
effectively what she's saying is companies are good or bad, but
Yeah.
that's just stupid.
Right.
Kelly, I don't know you. I'm sure you're a very nice Ms. Evans. Okay, Mr. Cook and Ms. Evans. I don't know you. You're Ms. Evans. I'm Matt. Nice to meet you. But why on earth would you think? Can you tell me? Do you think the company 3M is good or bad as an investment?
Right.
And if
Yeah.
I ask somebody else, because Jim Cramer was making the argument that they're good right now. Know why? Because they're making masks for coronavirus. I shit you not. Like,
Yeah.
so if you can make an argument that they're good and someone else can make an argument that they're bad, but nobody seems to think it's a problem that you can make an argument either way, because that's the way markets function. One person places one value, another places another value, and then the two of you come together and kind of agree on what the value would be, or you don't invest. There is no ESG cut. There isn't one thing that everyone agrees is that's ESG, this is good, this is bad. It's not a thing. There's no
By the way,
it's all about
yeah.
middle price. You think Tesla's good because they're sustainable? Good. Then you're willing to pay more for that stock because you want it. If you think Tesla shits on its employees and has a poor governance system and that matters more to you, good. Don't buy it or buy it for less. That's how markets work. ESG is not a cut.
And by the way, I
I'm
don't
in
really.
rare form today.
Yeah, you are. I like it because I'm really tired. But I really dislike this type of journalism. There are plenty of other ways to pressure corporate America to get more green. What are the ways? Like, can she at least tell us the ways? No,
There's
seriously.
so many of them that she doesn't have time
Yeah,
to write them
so
down.
many. All right, the next point. She says, think about it. If you're saying, take my money and invest it in causes I care about, you are most definitely not saying, take my money and invest it as profitably as possible. In fact, if cause-driven investing is your goal, why would you even have your money manager do it? Are they really the best trained to figure out whether, say, Pepsi should be one of your investments? Sounds like a job better suited for a think tank to me.
Well, guess what? 3,000 years ago, it was like priests and shamans saying Pepsi is a good investment. So I'm glad that we're writing out op-eds using a method of investing from 3,000 years ago. I mean, literally, the Talmud has parts of it talking about like real estate that you can and should invest in or shouldn't invest in.
But am I wrong here? Money managers have to make a decision one way or another anyway, right?
I mean, that's what you pay them to do.
Yeah, right. So why
Not to mention the fact that if you think you're an investor without a cause, if you think profitability isn't a cause,
yeah, exactly,
you're fundamentally missing the point of humanity.
Very reason why the Business Roundtable came out with its stakeholder nonsense, because they're trying to say that cause alone is hurting us.
But I mean, forget that. Like you're operating under like the assumption. You're operating not the assumption, the belief that earnings is the thing that matters. How is that any more or any less an ideology than earnings aren't the only thing that matters? So you've separated the world into these cause-based investors who should just go find a think tank to do their work for them. And then, the meaty earnings-based, profitability investors, which is the point of economics. The undertone of that question is, if you aren't in the markets for profitability. Get out of the markets and have someone else do it. Ask your
What? Yeah.
ask your imam or ask your mom. Ask somebody
Mom.
else.
But why the implication anyway that ESG data points are so unbelievably opaque and difficult to understand that we need to get a think tank? Where does that come from? Is it like
I don't know. I mean, like
ESG
this.
represents like an elitist type of investing? Is that what she's implying?
It's like this article when you sent it to me is like the perfect encapsulation of arguments that I agree with put next to a fundamental like misunderstandings about humanity and markets. Like it's just between and ESG, like what it's supposed to do and solve for and be for everybody. It's just like I mean, okay, you could just rewrite that sentence as, you're either looking at earnings, like profitability is basically one number. It's earnings, right? You're either looking at earnings or you're looking at all data to make your decisions. And if you're looking at all data, go to a think tank. If you're looking at earnings, then you belong in the market, or your money manager can do it. So we've narrowly construed our money manager's ability to look at one number and tell us it went up or it went down. This is good or this is bad. Instead of empowering the money manager to say, let me look at all the data and actually project forward what we think a company will look like in the future in the context it will operate.
It does. I know she doesn't speak for CNBC, but it does make CNBC seem very simple.
No, it's just clickbait. It's fine, but I'm baited.
I
am a snowflake right now.
Moreover, how much are you paying in fees for your money manager to pick climate or ESG approved companies for you, and how do you know whether that's too much or not?
Yeah, that's she's right on.
Fear mongering.
But that she's right on. Like ESG fees are higher. And they're higher for a reason, right? It costs more to actually get the data because the data is hard to go get. But people are willing to pay a premium. It's hard to get
for one company. It's hard to get for an aggregate of companies.
Right, exactly. But people are willing to pay a premium if you put the ESG moniker on it, and that she's not wrong. That I agree with her.
Why are you worried about it?
I mean, we talked about here, if you wanted to get data, I wanted to get data on the Business Roundtable board. The Business Roundtable board is like 10 or 11 companies, right? We're not talking about a lot of companies. But to get data on them, I had to go out and hand collect it company by company. You do not have access to data that anyone else in the market has. And that's not sophisticated data. That is just earnings and cash and like dividends paid. It's whatever's in their actual filings. That's just filed data. If you want like data to make better investment decisions on, you have to be a money manager. You can't afford it otherwise. So she's kind of right. Like this data is not democratic. And the stakeholder conversation, it's not an open source. We talked about it. It's not open source. That's its fundamental flaw. If it's not open source, it's not accessible to the stakeholders you're talking about. She's not wrong. She's saying that like, look, your money manager can charge you whatever the hell they want because you don't have access to it and you don't know how to hold them accountable to it. She's not wrong. I actually agree with her.
The part that bugs me here is just making a distinction between what the money manager is already doing and ESG data. Like, why are they so different?
Well, that's a different. Yeah, that's a good question. It's not in a lot of ways, but I mean, I think her point is they can upcharge you because they put ESG on it, even if it's not really different.
Yeah, but
that's not her point because she's separating the two. But
if your money manager comes to you and says, "Hey, you know what? I just gained access to 2,000 more data points, and I'm going to put more effort into evaluating these companies from different perspectives." Is that not a value add? I mean, I guess I just don't understand her aim.
Jeez Louise.
Are you moving me forward?
No. I just had like 5 things. Just my.
All right, I'm gonna move forward. Here's our next point. If I were a savvy money manager, I'd jump on the ESG bandwagon so that I could attract the attention of hordes of young and/or cause-driven types to give me their money to invest. B, charge them more than I could get away charging for index funds these days. And C, never have to worry about whether my performance actually justified my fees because I know my new investors aren't prioritizing that anyway. There's so much anger and snark in this section. No, I'm serious. Like I just don't get I don't get the direction of her anger. I don't. I mean, ESG bandwagon. Obviously, she's making fun of ESG. She hordes of young and/or cause-driven types. So she's making fun of like stupid
She just said
Billie
millennials
Eilish,
without
Stone
saying
Creek,
millennials.
millennials. Yeah, because how dare they have their own brains? And then she's saying that oh, just charge them whatever we want because we're making it up on it. Like it's like now we're entering snake oil salesman category. Like this is just I just don't get that. It's like intellectually like dull arguments. I'm
No, she's
sorry.
positioning ESG as a fad. That's all, and she's positioning it
Well,
as like TikTok for investing,
but
which
what
is
makes? But what about having 2,000? And okay. I'm guessing here. I don't even know how many data points we're talking about here. But why is this suddenly adding? 1,000 more data points about in the process of how we evaluate public corporations. How is that a fad?
and that's the part I'm with you, man. I don't.
It's I mean I started my work in this area at the corporate library here in Portland, Maine. We were corporate governance experts, leaders in our field. Uh, all of the information we collected, Kelly Evans, is all publicly available data from public filings. Like there's nothing about it is fatty. It's just it's literal and actual data about how companies run themselves. Like it's really to the core of what they are, right? I just don't follow this logic. I
So, but
don't I
here's
don't
my
get it.
takeaway from this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Like, I sort of want authors of pieces like this because this is not a like an idiosyncratic piece. There's like a whole segment of the business
Yeah, that's why I grabbed it. Yeah,
marketplace that talks about this and
yeah,
like this. I want to just give everyone who's written a piece like this all of the data you can get on a single company and then all of the stuff that's called ESG data and say, okay, I want you to I want you to make a decision, make an investment decision about this company and watch them actively try to ignore the ESG data
yeah. It's true. It's
and
true.
then find themselves sort of like, oh, well, that kind of is interesting. Oh, well, what about, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
really think of that angle.
Right. Oh,
That's all it
yeah.
is.
This
This,
company didn't listen to its shareholders when they tried to vote out this board member for having a related party transaction with the CEO's brother. Oh, interesting.
here,
There's
Kelly,
no way to ignore that. They would not ignore that.
here's, if, if you look at Boeing right now, we talk about
Yeah.
this, I talk about this ad nauseum. Would you rehire that board? The
I mean,
data
I
that
would.
you would
I would,
use
but yeah.
to understand that you shouldn't rehire that board is called ESG data. It's G.
Yeah.
You're just looking
Uh,
at the fact that Ken Duberstein orchestrated the most loyalist,
right.
crony-ridden board who are all entrenched. And now you've got an entrenched CEO again. But how is this different? This isn't a bandwagon. This is activist investors have been doing this for 20 years. This isn't new stuff.
No.
What she's doing is conflating what everybody conflates, which is, and she says it, cause-driven investing. Like, and the
Yeah.
causes she's thinking of is, I care about plastic, and I care about climate, or I care about tobacco. She's conflating all of those things with the only thing ESG does. Guess what? If you know how much plastic a company created, and you knew there are plastic regulations coming, do you think that's cause driven? There are investors out there who would say this company actually could see an earnings slump. Your favorite number, earnings, because we now have information on how much plastic they produce. That's not like, I don't know, that's just good solid thinking.
Yes. Yes. It's like analyzing someone's health just by their height and weight and ignoring hundreds of other factors.
By
All
that
right. Finally,
by that token, I
uh,
I'm Michael
this
Phelps.
this is the last point. This isn't even getting into the contradictory issues that the ESG moniker raises. For instance, which of the letters is most important? What if a company has great governance but isn't environmental enough, or vice versa? Are they in or are they out? Who is making those calls? I mean, this is the only part of it that I definitely agree with this part. This is where it gets tricky.
No,
And
but
this is where we think the acronym kind of sucks because it does set up this artificial premise that these things are always working together, I think it's misleading in that way. And I think this is why we want to change this acronym and have a new way of describing what this data is, because they're not right. They're not in competition with each other, right?
Right. There's the sort of. I mean, but look, you can reframe that as. I mean, the acronym hurts ESG because of this argument, like because this argument exists.
Yeah, and again, I do agree with her in this argument because it's challenging.
I also think that it passes. I mean, like it's sort of a dumb pass the buck. Like, which am I supposed to care more about?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
need me to tell you what you care more about?
It's
You're an
more
investor. Make a
it's
fucking
more
decision.
Anger and snark.
Don't wait for somebody to tell you what you should care about. If you've done that, then you are so functionally fixated on one way of thinking that you don't deserve. A fool and his money is soon parted. If you can only think about one thing and you can only do what people tell you to do, you can't come to a conclusion that, guess what? The governance at Tesla will not allow them to achieve their environmental goals. The benefit will be offset by their poor governance. If you can't come to that conclusion yourself, or you can say any governance failure we can work on over time, but the environmental benefits put them in a position to be the beta of the future. You can make that decision. That's what happens. That's what a portfolio manager does. You get paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per year to make those decisions. And you're going to say, which one should I care more about? That is just absurd.
Well, I think her point is that she doesn't think caring has anything to do with investing.
It's just absurd. It doesn't make any sense to me. And every person can invest based on the criteria that they believe matters most. That's what that's what makes the market supposed to be useful. That's what that price you see, the stock price, reflects what everybody cares about. And it hasn't cared about climate.
She still reserves the right to mock you if you invest in a way that hasn't been the mainstream investment philosophy in the last 100 years.
Fine. You mock away. I don't like if your benchmark is my portfolio beating your portfolio, then what time we can pick a time scale, because I bet 100 years from now your portfolio may not exist unless you're just cap weighted and doing whatever the market says.
Well, I was gonna say, like, shouldn't there be another part of this article where she's just like, you know what, all these money managers, as she calls them, should just go out of business anyway, because why don't we just invest in the S&P 500, because it seems to go up anyway, so what are we doing here?
I think actually the conclusion of this article should have just been and P.S. Think tanks should just supplant money managers as the only form of investing criteria.
I'd like to see her.
In which case we could start the Business Pants think tank.
I would love to see her drawing of what the people in this think tank look like. They're probably like this gnarly troll-like figure.
No, it's entirely comprised of Mark Zuckerberg's independent board.
We can only wish. All right, that's it. We've gone beyond long. Yeah, play us out of here.
Yeah, that was long, but I was ranty, and that's how it goes. This was Business Pants. That is Damian Rollis, a sleepy Damian Rollis today. You're going to be happy tomorrow, right?
Woo.
I am Matt Moscardi. We are Free Float Media. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, rate us, share us. Seriously, I hate pleading every single time, but if we had like 1,000 ratings, then I could stop. I could sleep at night. Thank you to our team here, the two Courtneys, Dan Rogachnik, Todd Hovanek and the Asset Clowns, John Walsh doing our art, and we will be back at you tomorrow with a big bag of business nuggets.
Oh God, that's right. Yeah.
You ready for that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Damian.
Yeah.